Malik Carter, a young black boy, fights against the injustice that has torn his family apart after his father, Daniel, is wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. The case is manipulated by corrupt officers, including Lieutenant Mason, who frames Daniel to protect a criminal syndicate. As Malik uncovers the truth, he faces widespread resistance, both from within the police department and the broader system, which dismisses his family's fight. The story highlights racial prejudice and the struggle against a biased system that continuously exploits and silences marginalized voices. The morning was just beginning, and the streets of the city were bustling with the usual noise: honking cars, the murmur of busy pedestrians, and the thick, humid air. Malik hurried through the crowded sidewalk, maneuvering past food vendors and people rushing to work. His neighborhood, as lively as it was chaotic, mirrored his own hectic life. The old leather strap of his father's watch pressed against his side, its hands frozen in time. But to Malik, it was more than a mere trinket. It was a connection to the man who had always told him, "Never let go of justice, son. No matter what anyone tells you, fight for what's right." His father, Marcus, had been wrongfully convicted of a crime he didn't commit. As his mother, Amara, worked long hours at the local laundromat, Malik had grown up knowing the sting of injustice, but he never lost the faith his father had instilled in him. Today, like every other day, Malik made his way across the busy street to school, his thoughts filled with unfinished chores waiting for him at home. But little did he know, today was going to be different. At the corner, he spotted Officer Lauren, a familiar face. She was one of the few officers in the area who always greeted the local kids with a smile. Today, however, she looked exhausted. Her uniform was tight across her rounded belly, and Malik noticed with concern that she was pregnant. He thought to himself, "She's out here, directing traffic while carrying her baby." Lauren was positioned in the middle of the road, gesturing for cars to stop so a large truck could reverse into a side lane. As the truck began its maneuver, a sharp shout from further down the street cut through the air. "Look out, the bike!" Malik's eyes darted to the source of the noise, and his heart skipped a beat. A man on a bike was speeding toward them, swerving wildly as he fought to regain control. The bike was headed straight for Lauren, who didn't see the danger coming. Time seemed to stretch out as Malik froze for a split second, hoping someone else would react. But as the crowd stood still, his instincts kicked in, and he bolted toward her. "Watch out!" he yelled, rushing toward Lauren. She turned just in time to see the bike speeding toward her. Malik reached her in a flash, shoving her to the side with all his strength. Both of them stumbled, and he quickly grabbed her arm to steady her. The rider on the bike crashed to the pavement with a loud thud, lying there, winded but unharmed. A small crowd began to form, murmuring amongst themselves. Lauren, one hand on her belly, turned to Malik, her face pale but filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaky. "If it weren't for you—" Malik shook his head, still breathless. "I saw you weren't going to make it. Are you okay? Is anything hurting?" Lauren took a deep breath and tried to compose herself, though Malik could see the sweat on her forehead. "I'm fine," she assured him, though she hesitated. "But I think I need to sit down for a moment." Reluctantly, she sank onto a nearby bench, still cradling her stomach. A man from the crowd stepped forward, casting a skeptical glance at Malik. "What's this kid doing? Causing trouble?" the man muttered. Malik ignored the comments, crouching down beside Lauren with a concerned expression. "Are you sure you're all right? Do you need us to call an ambulance?" Before she could respond, a voice called out from behind her. "Lauren, are you all right?" Malik turned to see a tall figure striding toward them, a man in uniform, her husband, Chief of Police, Isaac. His face was tight with concern as he reached them. "I'm fine," Lauren said quickly, looking up at her husband. "This young man saved me from a bad accident if he hadn't been there." Isaac's gaze shifted from Lauren to Malik, his eyes narrowing at first in suspicion, but softening when he saw the boy's worried face. "Thank you," Isaac said, his tone now sincere as he knelt down. "What's your name?" "Malik," the boy replied quietly. Isaac shook his head slightly, his expression warming. "Malik, you saved my wife today. I can't thank you enough." Malik, still unsure of what to say, hesitated before shaking Isaac's hand. He had no idea that this small, courageous act would be the start of something much bigger, something that would change his life forever. As Lauren caught her breath, Isaac remained close, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. His eyes were filled with concern. "Are you sure you're okay, Lauren? Do we need to go to the hospital?" "I'm fine, really," she smiled weakly, but it was clear the encounter had shaken her. "Thanks to Malik." Malik stood off to the side, still clutching his backpack straps, unsure of what to do next. He felt a weight in his chest, but also a deep sense of relief for doing what felt right. Isaac stood up and walked over to him, his imposing figure now calm. "Malik," Isaac said, his voice steady but filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you if it weren't for you." Malik merely nodded, his mind racing with thoughts of his father, of the wrong that needed righting. Isaac paused for a moment before continuing. "You did something incredible today. Is there anything I can do to repay you? Anything at all?" Malik was caught off guard by the offer. He hadn't expected this kind of gratitude. Part of him wanted to say he didn't need anything. He was just doing the right thing. But then, his father's face flashed in his mind, and his heart hardened with resolve. "I don't need anything for myself," Malik said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "But I want you to look into my father's case." Isaac's brow furrowed in confusion. "Your father?" Malik nodded, gathering all his courage. "His name is Marcus Davis. He was accused of stealing from his workplace, but he didn't do it. I know he didn't. Please, I need you to investigate." Isaac's expression softened as he listened, but there was a noticeable tension in the air. Nearby, people began to murmur quietly among themselves. The chief's suspicion had turned to curiosity. "What makes you so sure?" Isaac asked, his voice calm but probing. Malik wiped his hands on his pants and took a deep breath. "He was a hard worker, a good man. They said security footage showed him, but I know it wasn't him, and he always wore this watch." From his pocket, Malik pulled out his father's old watch and placed it in Isaac's hands. "It's the same as the one in the video, but my father wasn't wearing it that day. I just know he didn't do it." Isaac examined the watch, his expression becoming more thoughtful. This small detail, perhaps insignificant to some, could be the key to unraveling a larger lie. Isaac turned to Lauren, who had approached them, her eyes soft with understanding. "I think we should listen to him," Lauren said gently, her voice encouraging. Isaac hesitated, torn between his responsibilities and the growing realization that something wasn't right. After a long pause, he nodded. "All right, Malik, I'll look into it, but I can't promise anything just yet." Malik's heart skipped a beat. Hope began to kindle in his chest. "Tell me everything you know," Isaac said. Malik began recounting his father's story, about how Marcus had been framed for theft, how the evidence had seemed damning, but how he always knew the truth. He spoke about the man his father was, the principles he had lived by. Isaac listened closely, though he knew this wouldn't be easy to untangle. "And the watch?" Isaac asked, still holding it. "His," Malik replied, "was at home when he was arrested. The one in the video wasn't." Isaac studied the watch closely before nodding. "I'll start with this." As the conversation ended, Lauren knelt down to smile at Malik. "You're more than just brave. You're an amazing son. Don't lose hope." Malik offered a small, grateful smile as Isaac and Lauren walked away. As he watched them go, a new sense of hope stirred inside him. Maybe, just maybe, justice would come for his father after all. "Chief, you really want to revisit the Davis case?" Mason asked, his expression sour as he eyed Jack. "That case was closed over a year ago. Everything about it was straightforward." Jack, his arms crossed and gaze unwavering, responded firmly. "I've received a complaint from Malik's family. There are details about the surveillance footage and witness testimony that don't add up. We need to take another look." Mason shrugged, irritation flickering across his face. "You know Marcus Davis is serving his sentence, right? Reopening this case will only waste our time and could damage the team's reputation." Jack's voice remained calm but resolute. "We're not doing this to protect reputations. We're doing it to seek the truth." Mason hesitated for a moment, then muttered under his breath, "All right, Chief, I'll pull the reports." But Jack caught the look Mason shot him before leaving, the subtle mix of annoyance and reluctance, as though he saw this investigation as an unwelcome chore. Sitting at his desk, Jack reviewed the evidence with a sharp eye. When he looked at the surveillance footage again, something didn't sit right. The beginning of the video was clear, but as the figure exited the warehouse, the frames began to blur unnaturally. Was it a technical glitch, or had the footage been tampered with? Jack requested the forensic team to recover the original footage, but when the data came back, he learned that the source files had been erased. Then, he turned his attention to Paul Stanford, the key witness in the case, a former warehouse employee. Paul's testimony had been crucial in securing Marcus's conviction. However, when Jack reached out to him, Paul's response was chilling. "I don't want to talk about this anymore, sir." Paul's voice was trembling as he quickly hung up the phone. Jack frowned, unease growing inside him. A key witness refusing to cooperate. That was far from ordinary. It was then that Malik showed up at the police station, holding a small bag. He placed it on Jack's desk, his face serious, but hopeful. "Uncle Jack, I think this might help," he said. Jack opened the bag to find an access card, one that granted entry to the warehouse where the theft had occurred. Malik explained, "My dad told me he forgot to return it the day he was arrested. He said he didn't go into the warehouse that night, but if someone else used this card, they might have framed him." Jack's eyes flickered with recognition. This could be a critical lead. He quickly handed it off to the tech department for analysis, praying it would provide a breakthrough. Later that day, Jack received an anonymous phone call. The voice on the other end was raspy and threatening. "Drop it, Jack. If you know what's good for you, you'll leave the Davis case alone. Otherwise, you'll lose more than just your reputation." Jack's grip on the phone tightened, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. For the first time, he realized the case wasn't just about a wrongful conviction. It was much deeper, possibly tied to something larger, a network of corruption or a conspiracy. But Jack was undeterred. He knew now that every step he took would lead him closer to the truth and closer to danger. At the tech office, Jack stood over a young technician named Ryan, his expression tense. The access card Malik had given him was the only lead he had, and he needed answers. Ryan inserted the card into the reader. "The system logs every use of this card," Ryan explained. "Just give it a moment." Jack's heart pounded as the data slowly began to appear on the screen. One entry stood out. The card had been used at 10:35 p.m. The night of the theft, Jack's frown deepened. This was a critical piece of evidence, but something was wrong. The user ID associated with the card didn't match Marcus's employee ID. "What does this mean?" Jack asked, his voice low. Ryan looked up, a puzzled look on his face. "It means someone used the card pretending to be Mr. Davis." This revelation sent a jolt of realization through Jack. If the access card had been misused, then the surveillance footage was likely tampered with as well. His suspicion grew that someone on the inside was manipulating the case. Jack dug into the list of warehouse employees present that night. One name stood out: Paul Stanford, the same witness who had suddenly retracted his statement. Jack knew he had to confront him in person. After hours of searching, Jack found himself standing outside a rundown apartment building. Paul opened the door hesitantly when he saw Jack standing on the threshold. "I told you, I don't want anything to do with this anymore." Paul's voice was weak with fear. Jack placed a firm hand on the door, blocking it from closing. "I'm not here to harass you, Paul. I just want the truth. If you don't speak now, you might never get the chance to. Do you want to live with this guilt?" Paul hesitated, his eyes darting nervously. After a long silence, he sighed heavily and invited Jack inside. Once seated, Paul's hands trembled as he spoke, his voice shaky. They forced me to say I saw Marcus in the warehouse that night," Paul confessed. "But the truth is, I didn't see him. I was working late, but when the theft happened, I wasn't even near the scene." Jack clenched his fists, trying to stay calm. "Who forced you?" Paul's gaze shifted uneasily, fear creeping into his eyes. "I can't say if I do. They'll come after me. I've seen what they can do." Jack's frustration bubbled to the surface, but he knew pushing Paul further would get them nowhere. Paul's confession, however, confirmed what Jack had feared. Marcus had been framed, and someone had been covering up something far bigger. Back at the station, Jack sought out Mason. "I just spoke to Paul Stanford," Jack said, his voice firm. "He admitted to being coerced into giving false testimony. I need you to explain this." Mason met Jack's gaze, his lips curling into a thin, almost mocking smile. "Do you really want to know, Jack? Sometimes we have to do what's necessary to close a case." Jack's anger flared, and he slammed his fist onto the desk. "Do what's necessary? This isn't just a case, Mason. This is an innocent man's life we're talking about." Mason's eyes hardened, and he responded coldly, "Careful, Jack. Digging into old matters isn't always wise. Not everyone wants the truth to come out." Jack took a deep breath, his heart heavy with the weight of the words. He wasn't just fighting to clear Marcus's name. He was now up against someone on his own team, someone who was willing to bury the truth. The next day, Jack received shocking news. The access card data he had sent for analysis had been erased from the system. Someone on the inside was actively working to stop the investigation. Realizing the full extent of the sabotage, Jack called an emergency meeting. But when he arrived, all he received were vague answers and a deafening silence. Someone in his team was protecting a secret, and Jack had no idea who. That night, as Jack sat alone in his office, the dim glow of his desk lamp casting shadows over Marcus's case file, he knew that continuing the investigation would bring even greater risks. But as Malik's hopeful eyes and desperate plea echoed in his mind, Jack made his decision. No matter the cost, he would bring the truth to light. With Malik's father's watch in his hand, a symbol of hope, Jack stepped into the night air, feeling the weight of the danger ahead. He called Rebecca on the way home. "Rebecca, I need you to meet me at the house right away. It's urgent." When she arrived, Jack laid everything out: the tampered video, Paul's coerced confession, the erased access card data, and Mason's betrayal. Rebecca listened intently, her expression hardening as Jack spoke. "Jack, you know if you keep pushing this, you're going to be up against everyone who wants to bury it," she warned, her voice low. Jack nodded, his resolve firm. "I know, but I can't turn back for Malik, for Marcus, for you. That boy saved your life without a second thought. I owe him this." Rebecca placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, her eyes determined. "Then we'll do this together, not just for Malik, but for anyone else who could become the next victim of this injustice." Jack clasped her hand tightly, knowing with her by his side, they could face whatever came next. The following morning, Jack found Malik sitting on the steps outside his apartment, his face lighting up when he saw Jack approaching. "Uncle Jack, do you have any news?" Malik asked eagerly, his eyes filled with hope. Jack sat down next to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Malik, I need your help. It might be dangerous, but I can't do this alone." Malik nodded without hesitation, determination written all over his face. "What do you need me to do?" Jack handed Malik a photo of Paul Stanford. "I need you to talk to him again. Paul's scared, but I think if it's you, he might listen." Malik looked at the photo, then met Jack's gaze. "I'll do it, for my dad, and for you." With Jack watching from a distance, Malik approached Paul's apartment. When Paul opened the door, he looked shocked, but didn't try to shut it. The real test was about to begin. "Mr. Stanford, I'm Malik Davis, Daniel Davis's son," Malik said, his voice steady, yet filled with conviction, as he looked Paul in the eye. Paul hesitated, a flicker of fear crossing his face. After a long moment, he stepped back and motioned for Malik to enter. Malik took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He met Paul's gaze and spoke, his voice trembling yet filled with determination. "I know you're scared, but my father doesn't belong in prison. He was framed. He's been paying for a crime he didn't commit, and I can't do this alone. But you can help him. If you stay silent, the truth will be buried forever." Paul's eyes flickered with uncertainty. He glanced at the young boy standing before him, small, yet resolute, and for a moment it seemed as though his spirit wavered. Finally, he sighed and looked down. "You don't understand, Malik. These people, they won't stop until they get what they want." Malik's voice grew more urgent. Do you really think they can hurt you forever if we don't stand up now? They'll keep doing this to people, and I don't want anyone else to suffer like my family has." Paul's conflicted expression shifted, and after a long silence, he nodded reluctantly. "All right, Malik. I'll tell the truth, but I'll need protection." A glimmer of hope crossed Malik's face. "I'll talk to Uncle Jack. You'll be safe." The next day, with Jack and his team providing protection, Paul appeared at the police station to make a new statement. He revealed the shocking truth. Mason had coerced him into lying, altered the surveillance footage, and manipulated the evidence to frame Daniel. Mason had been working with a criminal syndicate, taking money to cover up the theft, and Daniel was simply a convenient scapegoat. As Paul spoke, his voice laced with bitterness, Jack's fists clenched. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. Mason hadn't just betrayed the system, he'd ruined an innocent man's life to protect his own corrupt dealings. Jack made up his mind he would confront Mason head-on. Jack entered the conference room where Mason was flipping through a file casually, acting as if nothing had changed. "Mason!" Jack's voice cut through the silence, sharp and commanding. Mason looked up, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "What is it now, Jack, another lecture?" Jack placed Paul's new statement on the table, his eyes burning with fury. "I've got everything I need to take you down. Your lies, your tampered evidence, your corruption. You're finished." Mason chuckled darkly, unfazed. "And you think you can take me down? This department needs people like me, Jack, not dreamers like you." Jack stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Justice doesn't need people like you. You've turned this place into a disgrace, but I'll make sure it's cleaned up." Before Mason could leave, Jack's team blocked the door. Within moments, Mason was handcuffed and led away, his protests falling on deaf ears. Jack didn't look away as Mason was escorted out, the weight of the truth finally settling in. In the days that followed, Jack continued to prepare for the reopening of Daniel's case. He worked tirelessly with his team, gathering new evidence, securing witness testimonies. Most notably from Paul Stanford today, the special hearing would begin, and Jack knew this was about more than just clearing Daniel's name. It was about standing up for truth, no matter how dangerous the path. Malik, his mother Amara, and Jack entered the courtroom together. Malik's grip tightened on his mother's hand as they saw Daniel, escorted in shackles. His father's face looked weary, but when their eyes met, a flicker of faith passed between them. Jack moved forward, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Today is your day, Daniel. I won't stop until I bring you home." Daniel nodded, his voice quiet but strong. "I trust you, Jack, and I trust Malik." As the hearing began, the atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with tension. The prosecution presented the same evidence that had been used to convict Daniel, surveillance footage and witness testimony, both of which had been manipulated. When it was Jack's turn to speak, he walked to the stand with calm confidence. "Your Honor," Jack began, his voice firm, "I request a full review of the evidence in this case. The original evidence was tampered with by someone within the investigative team. The footage was altered, key card logs were erased, and most critically, the witness testimony of Paul Stanford, who was coerced into giving false statements, was fabricated." The courtroom was quiet as Paul took the stand, looking nervous but resolute. His words rang clear. "My initial testimony wasn't truthful. I was threatened by Lieutenant Mason to claim I saw Mr. Daniel Davis at the scene, but in reality, I didn't see anything." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecution tried to discredit Paul, but Jack swiftly presented more evidence, showing that Mason had taken bribes from a crime syndicate to manipulate the investigation. Jack concluded his argument with a powerful statement. "No one has the right to strip an innocent person of their freedom for personal gain. Daniel Davis has already lost more than a year of his life because of this injustice. Today I ask you to return to him what he deserves, his freedom, his dignity." The judge sat in silence for a long moment, weighing the new evidence. Finally, he spoke. "Based on the new evidence and witness testimony, we hereby overturn the conviction of Mr. Daniel Davis. He is to be released immediately." Malik gasped, his eyes welling with tears as he watched his father walk down from the stand, the handcuffs being removed. Daniel embraced his wife and son, tears streaming down his face as he smiled, his relief palpable. I knew you wouldn't give up on me, Malik, Daniel whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You were my light in the darkest days. Mason couldn't escape the truth any longer. After his arrest, he was charged with multiple offenses, including evidence tampering, bribery, and abuse of power. His fall was swift and brutal, and the damage he caused rippled through the entire department. Though Jack faced immense pressure from his former colleagues, he remained resolute in his mission to restore justice. He found support from Rebecca, who stood by his side through every step of the journey. A few days later, Jack visited the Davis family at their apartment. Daniel, now free, was fixing up old furniture and rearranging things in the space that had once felt so oppressive. Jack, Daniel said, gratitude shining in his eyes. I don't know how to thank you. Jack smiled, shaking his head. You don't owe me anything. The real hero here is Malik. He's the one who taught me that justice must never stay silent. Malik entered the room, a proud smile on his face. He hugged Jack tightly. Thank you, Uncle Jack. You gave my family everything back. With Rebecca's help, Amara found a more stable job at a nearby office. Sparing her from the exhausting work at the laundromat, Daniel accepted an offer to work as a maintenance staff member at the police department, where he could begin rebuilding his life. Life slowly returned to normal for the Davis family, but now it was filled with hope and gratitude. Malik, once a young boy burdened by his family's pain, had become a hero, not just in his own eyes, but in the eyes of the whole neighborhood. A photo of him helping Rebecca went viral, and his courage earned him a special scholarship from his school to support his dreams. One afternoon, Malik visited the police station to thank Jack, carrying a small notebook filled with lessons he'd learned throughout the ordeal. Uncle Jack, I want to thank you for believing in me, Malik said, his eyes shining with determination. I'll never forget what you and Aunt Rebecca have done for my family. Jack glanced at the notebook, his chest swelling with pride. Malik, you've taught me an invaluable lesson: never stop pursuing justice, no matter how difficult the road. That evening, the Davis family gathered around their modest dinner table, sharing laughter and love. As they enjoyed each other's company, Malik, his face serious, finally spoke up. I've been thinking a lot about everything we've been through. I want to help people, like Dad. People who've been treated unfairly. I want to become a lawyer. Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his eyes misting with pride. I believe in you, Malik. You're going to fight for justice, not just for our family, but for so many others. Amara smiled warmly, her voice filled with love. I'm so proud of you, son. Whatever you need, we'll always be here for you. A few weeks later, Jack arranged a meeting between Malik and a legal aid organization. There, he met Laura Winslow, a respected attorney who shared his passion for justice. So, you're the famous Malik Jack's been telling me about, Laura said with a smile, shaking his hand. You've got an inspiring story. We need people like you. Malik, though nervous, responded with determination. I just want to learn and help others. If I can do something, maybe I can make the world a better place. Laura exchanged a look with Jack and Rebecca before nodding. Let's start today, Malik. We'll help you get ready for your journey. As Malik stepped out of the building, the sky above him was clear and bright, the promise of a new future ahead. The watch that had once belonged to his father, now securely fastened to his wrist, he knew that this journey wasn't just his. It was a journey shared with his family and community. Rebecca and Jack stood together, watching him walk away. Rebecca leaned toward Jack and whispered, "That boy is going to do something extraordinary." Jack smiled, his eyes filled with pride. I know Malik isn't just a brave young man. He's a symbol of change. And as Malik stepped into his future, one filled with hope, courage, and justice, he knew that with every step, he wasn't just telling his story, he was rewriting the future for others. Under Mrs. Laura's mentorship, Malik grew into a skilled and thoughtful young advocate. He began noticing flaws in evidence, interviewing witnesses with precision, and proposing strategies that many seasoned attorneys overlooked. One afternoon, after wrapping up a meeting about a complex case, Mrs. Laura called Malik into her office. "Malik, you have tremendous potential," she said, her voice warm but firm. "But potential needs nurturing. How would you feel about attending a basic legal skills course? I'll cover all the costs." Malik's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't believe his ears. "I'd love to thank you so much," he replied, his eyes wide with excitement. Beyond his work at the legal aid organization, Malik regularly returned to his old neighborhood. He shared his family's story with friends and local kids facing similar struggles. One day, he stood in front of a group of young students, recounting his journey. "I used to believe I had no place in this world," Malik began, his voice steady. "But thanks to my family's faith and those who believed in me, I realized that we all have the power to make a difference. Justice isn't some distant concept. It starts with courage, and it starts with you." His words resonated deeply with the crowd. From a boy who once walked with his head down through narrow alleys, he had become a symbol of hope and perseverance in the very community that raised him. At home, after dinner, Daniel, Amara, and Malik sat together. Daniel smiled at his son, pride shining in his eyes. "Malik, you've accomplished more than I ever dreamed. Have you thought about continuing your education to become a professional lawyer?" Malik gripped his father's hand firmly, his voice full of resolve. "I've made up my mind, Dad. I'll do everything I can to get into law school. I want to help people who've been treated unfairly, just like you, people who have no voice." Amara, her eyes glistening with tears, smiled warmly. "Son, you're proof that anything can change if we don't give up." 5 years later, Malik graduated from law school with honors, supported by the legal aid organization and the scholarship he had earned. On his graduation day, he received a letter from Jack and Rebecca. "Dear Malik, we always believed you would achieve great things, but more importantly, you've kept your heart pure and your faith in justice strong. We are so proud of you. Continue this journey and never forget what you've done for your family and for us. With love, Jack and Rebecca." Reading the letter, Malik felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had achieved his dreams, but he had also become a beacon of hope, just as Jack had always hoped. Malik's journey didn't end with his graduation. As a passionate young lawyer, he returned to the neighborhood where he grew up and opened a small legal office to assist the underprivileged. Every day, he glanced at his father's watch, now fully repaired, a constant reminder of the trials they had overcome. Justice wasn't just a lofty idea. It was something attainable for anyone with the courage and determination to fight for it. Years passed, and the story of Malik Carter and his family spread throughout the city, becoming an inspiration not just in their neighborhood, but across the region. Malik's small legal office in the old neighborhood grew into a symbol of hope for those seeking justice, no matter who they were. One morning, while organizing case files, Malik was interrupted by a visit from an elderly woman, Marjorie, whose weary eyes held a spark of determination. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice trembling, "I need your help. My family lost our home due to an unjust lawsuit. A large corporation falsified documents to seize our property, and the court refused to accept our appeal." Malik frowned, immediately sensing the injustice in her story. "I'll help you," he said firmly, "but this will be complicated. We'll be up against a powerful opponent." Marjorie looked at him, tears filling her eyes. "I believe in you. I've heard your story. If anyone can help us, it's you." Malik, unsure of his own abilities, sought advice from Jack, now retired but still a guiding figure in his life. "Jack, this case is tough. The company has the money, the influence, and the legal power. I'm not sure I can fight them alone," Malik confessed. Jack placed a reassuring hand on Malik's shoulder, his gaze confident. "Malik, you've already fought bigger battles than this. Remember, justice isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. You're not just fighting for Marjorie, you're fighting for all the people too afraid to stand up, thinking no one will listen." Jack's words reignited Malik's resolve. He gathered a team of passionate young lawyers and set out to fight for Marjorie's family. Months of intense courtroom showdowns followed, with Malik's team working tirelessly to gather evidence, track down witnesses, and expose the corporation's underhanded tactics. In the end, the court ruled in Marjorie's favor, ordering the corporation to return her family's home, along with compensation. Overcome with emotion, Marjorie turned to Malik. "You haven't just saved my family. You've restored my faith in justice." Malik smiled, relief washing over him. He knew this victory wasn't just for one family. It was a message to everyone that justice still existed and it could still prevail. Malik's office continued to grow, becoming not just a place of legal work, but also a hub for training young lawyers dedicated to serving the community. He hosted workshops, teaching neighborhood residents about their legal rights and how to protect them. One afternoon, a young boy, no older than 12, knocked on Malik's door. He stood timidly in the doorway and spoke softly. "I want to learn how to be like you. Will you teach me?" Malik smiled, recognizing the same spark in the boy's eyes that he once had. "Of course, but first, you need to know that being a lawyer isn't just about knowledge. It's about courage and integrity. Are you ready for that?" The boy nodded, determination written all over his face. Years later, Malik's name had become a household one, not just in the international legal community, but in the hearts of those from his old neighborhood. His law office continued to grow, and he became a mentor to many young lawyers. His legacy was one of courage, change, and hope. One day, Malik received a letter from the Global Justice Initiative, an international network of lawyers dedicated to supporting the oppressed. They invited him to join their advisory board to expand their efforts globally. "Dear Malik, we believe your story and your fight for justice in your local community can inspire efforts on a global scale. We invite you to join our team and help bring justice to regions where the legal system is weak or non-existent." Malik sat in his modest office, reading the letter over and over again. Pride surged within him, but so did a pang of hesitation. Taking this opportunity meant leaving behind the neighborhood that had shaped him, the place he had vowed to serve. He called a meeting with his team, including the young lawyers he had mentored. "I want to hear your thoughts," he said thoughtfully. "This opportunity could open up a new chapter, but I'm worried that if I leave, we'll lose the connection we've built with this community." One of his young lawyers, Claire, stepped forward, her eyes full of admiration. "Malik, you've inspired all of us. If you leave, we'll carry on what you started. Your spirit is in this office, and we'll make sure it never fades." Malik felt deeply moved by her words. Looking around the room, he realized that he wasn't alone in his mission. The legacy he had built was bigger than any single person. A few weeks later, Malik decided to accept the invitation from the Global Justice Initiative. Before leaving, he organized a gathering in the neighborhood to express his gratitude and say goodbye. At the event, Jack and Rebecca were there, carrying a framed photo of Malik standing with the Carter family on the day Daniel was freed. Jack smiled and placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "You're not just the pride of our family, Malik. You're a symbol of change. You've shown that no matter where we start, we can achieve greatness if we never give up." Rebecca added, "And no matter how far you go, your heart will always be here." Malik smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll never forget what you all did for me and my family. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new chapter." As he left for his new role with the Global Justice Initiative, traveling across the world to help oppressed communities, Malik's story continued to inspire. One day, as he returned to his old neighborhood, he saw a mural painted on the wall of his office. It depicted him standing among the people, his hand raised high, a symbol of justice. A local resident approached him with a smile. "We wanted everyone to remember that no matter where you go, your spirit will always be here." Malik placed his hand on the mural, feeling warmth fill his heart. He had fulfilled his father's wish to leave the world a better place, where justice wasn't just an ideal, it was a reality anyone could reach. As time went on, Malik's law office grew, and his efforts continued to inspire generations. He had not only become a successful lawyer, but a mentor, a symbol of courage, and a light that guided others. Through his work and the generations he inspired, Malik Carter's legacy was a lasting testament to the power of justice, hope, and determination. In this final part, the story concludes by showing Malik's growth into a successful lawyer and mentor, touching on the themes of justice, legacy, and the ripple effect of one person's courage. The narrative is brought full circle, with Malik continuing his journey, honoring the lessons of his family and community.